Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 SESAR Innovation Days, the SEEDS. I'm delighted to see so many of you here today and to know that we will have further participants joining us over the course of the event. This is the 11th edition of the SEEDS, and we are proud that over the last few years, the event has grown into a strong platform for Europe's ATM community to ensure mutual knowledge building and stimulate the exchange of ideas. We have around 1,100 participants registered to this year's event, a clear sign that the SEEDS is now recognized as the place to be for European aviation and ATM researchers. Sadly, this is our second virtual SEEDS. It is unfortunate that we cannot meet face-to-face again this year, given the circumstances. But despite not being able to take place as a physical event, this year's SEEDS promises to be an important opportunity for the research communities to present their research and discuss important topics that will define the future of ATM. I would also say that the pandemic has highlighted the urgent need to move ahead with the digital transformation of ATM in Europe to build greater resilience, scalability, and sustainability into the system. This not only requires stakeholders to implement the new technologies that are already available, but also to continue to invest in the innovation concept of the future. For this, the continuing engagement of the ATM research communities is essential, harnessing the young talent and collaborations that we see every year at the SESAR Innovation Days. Over the course of SESAR 2020, we allocated some 90 million euros to exploratory research, which includes 86 projects, feeding the program with new and inspirational research ideas, which challenge preconceived notions about ATM and the aviation value chain. These research projects have embraced topics that were initially not covered in the industrial research program, casting light on new hot topics relevant to our industry. One of these hot topics is multimodality, which is starting to be explored in depth by some of our research projects. We have been collaborating increasingly with our colleagues at Europe's Rail Joint Undertaking, formerly Shift2Rail, on this topic to ensure connected and sustainable European transport network. You will be able to hear more about this on Wednesday from my colleague, Carlo Borghini, Executive Director at Europe's Rail Joint Undertaking, as well as during a dedicated panel discussion on the topic. Other projects have been pushing the research agenda on artificial intelligence or machine learning applications to explore new research questions related to transparency and explainability of AI for aviation. This is now a very promising area of research being applied to an increasing number of ATM applications. We also have several innovative research projects ongoing, focusing on minimizing the environmental impact of aviation or minimizing the traffic disruptions due to severe weather conditions. These projects aim to transform the nature of our industry and are pushing the boundaries of ATM research. The most promising of these innovation projects are now being considered for inclusion in the industrial research strand of the SESAR 3 JU program, continuing the SESAR innovation pipeline. The SESAR JU is also proud of what the Engaged Knowledge Transfer Network has been able to achieve over the last 4 years. You will hear a bit more flavor about this in a few moments with Andrew and Paola take the floor. When Andrew and Paola, take the floor. You will hear but however, it goes to show that even smaller budget projects, such as the Engage Catalyst project, can co-create innovative solutions to important industry's challenges, an area which the SESAR JU is keen to develop in the new Digital European Sky program. As the aviation community, we must build upon our collective strengths if we are to make progress towards our ultimate shared goal of delivering smart, sustainable, and resilient air travel for Europe and its citizens. We have the impression that sometimes researchers do not dare to cross the line into the industrial world, but this doesn't have to be the case. Knowing that most of you in the audience today are coming from the aviation research community, I would really like to take this opportunity to encourage you to make new alliances with industry, bring them on board with your projects, allow them to already help you think about developments and implementation at an early stage of your R&D work. Keep this in mind over the next few days. Dare to think outside the box and take the time to visit the virtual poster exhibition and connect to your fellow like-minded researchers via the dedicated SEEDS mobile application, WOVA. We must not forget that exploratory research is never complete. We need to continue to look beyond what's on the horizon in order to respond to the growing demand for air travel, an increasing number of vehicles of all shapes and sizes, taking to our skies on all the other challenges described in the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda for the Digital European Sky. I'm really looking forward to hearing fruitful discussions over the next few days, and once again, wish you a warm welcome to the 11th edition of the SESAR Innovation Days. We have a chance to build back better, let's take it. Now, I'd like to hand over to Eamonn Brennan, who has a message for us. Please.
Good morning from Eurocontrol. It's really great to be part of the 11th SESAR Innovation Days, and I'm really looking forward to 2 really good and productive days of work. What I thought we might do this morning is just to sit back and look at for a moment what is it we're trying to achieve. So before I get into innovation, it's always a good idea to click back to reality. And what I want to look at really is how has our industry been performing over the last number of days and, in fact, over the last number of weeks. So what you can see is that we're currently operating at 75% of the 2019 traffic. And, you know, over the last while, it's been a little bit disappointing, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But if you look at the green line there in front of you, you can see that we made some really steady progress during the summer, and it's levelling off. And hopefully by Christmas, we'll start making some progress again. But it's really difficult times for our money. Now, what this means for you that are involved in research is it also means that there's less route charges, there's less availability of finance, and it's also harder to get airlines and harder to get airports and people like that involved in innovation projects. And when we look at the whole effect that it's had on aircraft, particularly the large airline operators, it's interesting to have a look at how they have fared out. First of all, the low cost have done quite okay. Look at Ryanair there, up 5%, but actually contrast that with number 5, which is EasyJet, down 43%. And that shows you the significant effect that the coronavirus has had on the UK market, particularly when you look at EasyJet. And just look right under EasyJet there at 46%, you can see British Airways. So really we've had a kind of basically a mixed effect throughout the network. And if we hadn't had cargo keeping us going for the last 2 years, we would have been in trouble. So, you know, with our innovation days today, it's always important to remember how is it for the actual cold face of the industry. And, you know, this basically is interesting when you look at the airspace. We're all involved here in improving air traffic management infrastructure, improving architecture. So have a look at a state like France. You know, you see a significant reduction since 2019, 19% down. Look at Spain, 17% down. And this translates very quickly into cash and also into traffic and into productivity, and also has effects on how training crews operate for aircraft, but also sector competencies for ATGOs, etc. And of course, the other part of the industry that's been very significantly impacted has been the airports. Here I would say we're looking at the hub airports, because the hub airports have been impacted the most. And here if you look at, for instance, at Charles de Gaulle, you know, 930 flights, that's a real significant reduction. But remember, they get paid by passengers, so actually they're earning a lot less. Istanbul, not so badly affected there. You can see it if you have a look at the other side of the network there. But generally, it's been a hard time for airports. But remember, hidden away behind these airports are a huge network of smaller airports that the low-cost carriers are using. Places like Rodez, places like Ciampino, places like Girona. All of these are doing kind of okay, doing a little bit better than before. So there's significant challenges. So when we're looking at a network effect for our airports, it's important to realise that point-to-point has now become a very, very large reality, even for long-haul operations point-to-point. So a lot of our research needs to focus not just on hubs, but on actually maximising the overall impact of the network from a capacity and an environmental point of view. Now, here we are today. And the big question in Europe, of course, is vaccinations. You know, fully vaccinated. I thought myself this time last year when I was talking to you that if everybody in Europe is fully vaccinated, then straight away we don't have any problems. We'll be able to move freely. But now we're faced with a new wave of problems. And only last week we've been hit like a rocket with the Omicron variant. And this is something that we hadn't foreseen in our projections. And the problem is, here we go again. So now it's the Omicron variant. Maybe next week it'll be the Rodez variant. Who knows? But what have we really learned? What I've learned from all of this is that this pandemic and the effect on air traffic, it might go on for years. It might actually be something we have to deal with every year. So we can't keep actually operating at the moment like we've got a very, very significant problem, like it's unique. Variant after variant is going to keep coming until the whole world is 100% vaccinated. And even then, something else might hit us. So we've been resilient in this industry and we've done very well. And I would particularly compliment the EU because the digital COVID certificate was really good. But remember, there are parts of the world that has adopted a zero COVID policy. And in my view, this has failed. So one thing I would say is that we have to understand that global systems operate globally. And this idea that you can restrict air travel and that it stops actually the spread of the virus, I think is actually rubbish. I mean, if we just look at the last week, there's now increasing evidence that the latest variant was in circulation in two weeks before the South Africans declared it a problem. And suddenly everybody's down on top of the South Africans for having done that. So it doesn't show very, very good kind of international solidarity if we don't make sure that we all work together. Successful systems work globally. So from a practical point of view, where are we? Well, only 2 months ago, we published on the 15th of October what I thought was a pretty reliable forecast. Remember, up to this, our forecasts were over 90% reliable. Right up to the end of November, middle of November, very close to the end, we were doing really well. If you have a look at the blue line there in front of you, that's what we're tracking. We were at 77%. We thought we would be at 76%. And then in the last week, we have dropped back down to 74%. Now, the question for me is, where are we? Will we survive this? Will this be a downward trend? I actually think that we will actually do quite well because, yes, we've got Christmas coming up. A lot of people will be reluctant to travel. I get that. But what's going to happen, I think, in the long run is that we will start to realise that variant after variant will come and we've got to start moving again and keep moving. So I think that once the efficacy of vaccines is proven and it's rolled out a little bit more, we will continue to return to growth. So for next summer, we're still predicting growth. We're still predicting a return by the end of 2023, and I'm quite confident that we will get there if we just get a little good stroke of luck with some of the variants in the months ahead. So fingers crossed. Now, today we're talking about research. We're talking about the next decade. And there's two big burning things I want to say to you that's important. First of all, is it's going to be greener. The decarbonisation of aviation is really important. Everybody knows it from the EU down, from, you know, the COP26. It's all about decarbonisation. And the second thing of what you're here today for is innovation and digitisation. We've got to get both of these things to work. But I think what's different than in the past is these are not separate circles. These are together. Now, we've got to have innovation and digitisation, but we've also got to have it in a way that reduces our carbon footprint. So the research now has a double objective. It's got to be innovative, it's got to be digital, it's got to be productive, it's got to add capacity, but it's also got to decarbonise. And that's important because remember, we're looking at the whole area of decarbonisation in aviation. And a thing I would say to you is that everybody thinks that aviation is a larger polluter than it is. And in many ways, our children and people who are in the media think that we've lost the PR battle. In other words, very few people consider that 10% of global aviation is as a result of the IT industry. You know, most people, for instance, think that aviation is a far more significant polluter than it is. 2% of global emissions are accounted for by aviation, 3.7% in the European Union. But let's stop for a moment. What do people actually think it is? Well, what people really think it is that it's 22%. So here we have a situation where perception is much worse than the reality. And in this industry, we've got to combine to try and show people that we've got a plan, we're going to do something about it, but we're not as bad as you think we are. And that's where I think that the whole idea of working together, and particularly those involved in research, need to be realistic and help the industry survive. I'm very pro-sustainability, I'm pro-aviation, but I'm not pro-killing aviation. And that's what I think we need to have a serious discussion about. Because remember, freedom is about travel. The fact that people can travel means we've less wars. In Europe, since 1945, freedom of movement, the fact that we've come together, the fact that we're all a global community, the fact that there are people from all over Europe engaged in the SESAR project means that we work together and means we're act as colleagues and brothers and everything works very well. But one thing I want to just mention to you, and this is really interesting to me, is this whole area of train versus plane. You know, tomorrow, I think you have a discussion on trains versus planes. And I think we've got to be careful here because we can measure everything from a plane. Are we measuring everything from a train? And I'm not against it. Obviously, intermodality is the key thing. And I'm very, very pro this. But I do think that we have to be fair to make sure that if a train can substitute a plane, good. But if it can't, then equally we have to recognise that and say, no, a plane is the more efficient way to go. You know, in Eurocontrol, we've looked at a lot of scenarios and we're not really big advocates of banning short-haul flights because I'll tell you why, and it's in black and white. It doesn't add up. And the reason I believe it doesn't add up is that, you know, if you look at the reality, 6.2% of flights, that's long-haul flights over 4,000 kilometres, they generate 52% of the CO2. And they're not even in our emissions trading scheme, long-haul flights. And then 30% of our flights, who are under 500k, they only generate 4.3% of our flights. Yet about 80% of the discussion in parliaments and in places like France is all about banning short-haul flights. Yes, it's okay if you've got a train, but you're actually not really addressing the carbon issue. And of course, remember, if you look at the carbon offsetting rules, CORSIA, ETS, etc., long haul is exempted from the global schemes. Yet all the short haul are included. So are we tackling the right problem? And all the research community that's here over the next few days have a great opportunity to say, yes, look at the problem. But I also want you to remember what is the reality. And, you know, in the last number of months, we published a very interesting research paper, which was basically talking about what is the perfect green flight. And we believe that by using current technology, you can remove up to 25.8% of the CO2 emissions from flights in Europe by 2030. By fuel-efficient air traffic management, new aircraft technology like hydrogens, electrification, and of course the most important of all in the short term is sustainable synthetic aviation fuel. I actually want to spend a moment on this. And the whole problem with SAF is you can't get it. It's 3 times the price of normal fuel. And if we are to achieve something, we have to have a short-term win. And the short-term win has to be before 2030. So we need to focus on making sure that incentives are there for the production of SAF, that SAF is available, that it's there, and then move on to the new aircraft technologies of electrification. You know, there's really exciting things happen. Remember, over 100 years ago, we weren't doing anything. We were all operating on the ground. Now we have, you know, hydrogen aircraft, we have the blended wing, we have all kinds of possible projects that actually will yield good results, but they take time. And I think that the problem we're suffering for in aviation and sustainability is because of the need for propulsion and the shortage of SAF, we're lagging behind others and having something realistic to do. If you look at a far larger polluter, which is the car industry, the public perceives that they have a better plan than we have because it's basically the electrification of cars. Whereas there's all kinds of really interesting things happening in the research. I'm very proud of the Airbus initiative we're involved with, which is the Fellow Fly. Basically, you know, flying like birds together. And this is something that's really, really good. And it's a really nice thing to be involved in. You know, there's up to between 5 and 10% fuel savings on long haul ops from operations like this. But here's the question. Can we use it? When will we use it? Where will we use it? Who will use it? So this is the question sometimes that I think gets dodged by researchers. We need to make sure that we produce something that we can actually use. And I'm very, very committed to this as an operational practitioner. And this can have help with significant reduction. We're very involved in Eurocontrol in supporting states and institutions. First of all, as you know, we're involved in the ETS scheme, and we have over 25 countries who are providing ICAO CORSIA data for. And this is a very key part of the aviation strategy generally. It helps people kind of meet their obligations under the CORSIA and under ICAO. But also, we're involved in helping ECAC and the environmental capacity building, the EU Fit for 55, and we're a partner with EASA in the 2022 European Aviation Environmental Report, where we will contribute key chapters. So it's everybody working together to do this. But for me, the key is about improving awareness. Improving awareness is making sure that we get our message across to the general public in all kinds of areas, in sustainability, in noise, all of the things that we as practitioners do. And I'm happy to say that next year we're going to produce, together with ECAC, a new collaboration on how and what the cost of environmental issues are for the next number of years. In other words, what does all this cost? And remember, at the end of the day, somebody has got to pay for it. It's got to be an airline or it's got to be a government, but somebody has got to pay for it. And it's really important that we realise that. In Eurocontrol, only in the last month, we had a very interesting sustainability summit, one of the most exciting ones I was at, where we had everybody that operates aircraft in Europe there. We had NGOs there, but we also had airports and everybody there. And what was very interesting from people like Michael O'Leary and Johan Lundgren talking to us, and Bertrand Picard and Patrick Key, is that there was a consensus. And the consensus in the room from like everybody, like the CEO of Whiz, Joseph Verratti, and Henrik Hollaloy as well, it was that we do have a plan. In aviation, we have a plan. But remember, it's top secret, and this is our problem. We need to sell the plan. And the plan is basically has got 4 elements. SAF, which we mentioned, aircraft technology, which is the change to technology, to engines, to propulsion systems. Also, carbon measures, the carbon measures of ETS, the carbon measures relating to CORSIA. All of these are key. And also, of course, finally, operational efficiencies, which is the single European sky, a better ATM network. And here's an important thing I want to say to you today, is you in SESAR 3 have a key role in delivering the plan. If you work together and just look at how all this thing comes together, we can actually deliver the plan by mapping this roadmap out and by mapping your research aimed at actually delivering all of these things. So if we can get these 4 messages out, we can actually convince the public that aviation has got a license to grow and that it can stay growing for the future. So that's why these innovation days are so important. For me, they've been going on for many years. It gives you guys a forum to come together, to mix with practitioners, because remember, people in practice will always want you to deliver faster than you can, and you will always want to research it to the nth degree, and somewhere in the middle is the junction. So what I would like to say to you is that, look, these have had a great success over many years. And I think it's important that we say that. I mean, we're looking at exploratory research, and also, you know, you have over 38 senior ATM research projects and all kinds of things here on the call today. And it's really interesting that some of these projects are focused on artificial intelligence, focused on environmental issues. But, you know, when we look at the real issues, we've got to be sure that we string this together as fast as we can. And Eurocontrol is very committed to being involved in aviation going forward. So what I would like to say to you is this, is that we've been a founding member of SESAR. We've been with you since the very start, and we've been a key role at every stage, and we will continue through SESAR 3. And I think that that's important. Only recently, our Provisional Council has approved 500 million of support, and we will shortly be signing the letter of commitment and legal documents to commit to SESAR 3. And I also just want to make the point that we hope to be involved in the SESAR Deployment Manager, which was published on the 29th of October. And it's a joint bid from Eurocontrol and operational stakeholders. And what's it about? It's about bridging the gap between research to deployment to the operation with the network manager. And that brings everything together. So I'm really excited about this. And I think for the first time, we're starting to get a consistent roadmap going from research through SESAR, deployment through the SDM, implementation through the network manager, all working together in close proximity and hopefully together. And that's really exciting for me. In Eurocontrol also, we have revamped completely what we're doing in Bretigny. We've turned it into a digital labs environment, closely working with the network manager and working closely on validations as well. And these are really important. And if I could give you a couple of examples of what's involved in the Innovation Hub. First of all, you know, we're involved in collaborative curfew management. Really important. Communities who live around airports are very interested in this. We're also involved in how do individual states perform with the dashboard. In other words, how are you doing in your locality? And we're doing things like, you know, takeoff predictability in the Netherlands. We've also done a huge amount of projects in Turkey and also in the United Kingdom. So it's important that you realise that we try to devote our research to solving practical problems, then roll them out through the network manager so that they get implemented very quick. And I think this has to be the focus of SESAR 3, to make sure that we really research, but then we start to get them into operation as quickly as possible. Only last week, the Paris drone corridor had its launch. And this is something that's really very good. It's a 40-kilometre drone corridor over cities, rails and roads, infrastructure. It's a partnership, you know, with Thales, with the Paris ecosystem and with Eurocontrol. And what's really interesting is that we now have a drone centre of excellence, you know, aimed at, you know, industrialising drone activities, but actually seeing how it actually works in practice. And the big target here is that we can roll this out in time for the Paris Olympics. So what I would like to say to everybody is you've two really exciting days ahead. There's a lot we learn from you. We like the input that we get from you every year. We're very, very keen to make sure that all of the info that you feed in that we can deploy. And what I would ask you to look at is two things. One, how can we implement things faster? And two, how can we link it closely with our sustainability option? So from everybody in Eurocontrol, Gorimila Mahagav.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Eamonn, for this very inspiring presentation indeed. And thank you for the commitment of Eurocontrol into the SESAR 3 joint undertaking. Now I would like to hand over to Jane. Jane, you have a presentation, I think.
Yes.
Please.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so thank you. I mean, we don't see my video, huh? We just see the presentation now. Okay, I'll try it. Okay, good. No problem. Okay, thank you. So, yeah, for this very inspiring presentation, a lot of information. So I will pick it up from the part on the decarbonization and where we want to make this industry climate neutral, because of course, yes, Eamonn was mentioning at the beginning of his presentation a big issue for the sector right now, which is this COVID issue, but I think the climate change issue is also a very big issue where the sector also should act. Maybe next slide, please. Okay, so the idea is, and he mentioned a similar target. We have to deliver by 2030 a reduction of 30% of greenhouse gas emissions compared to 2020. And the goal is to have the industry fully climate neutral by 2050, in line with the Green Deal and the Commission priorities. Next slide, please. So I will put it a little bit in the context of what we are doing here for research and innovation at the Commission. So as you know, Horizon Europe is the biggest program or single spending from the European Commission, is 25.5 billion euros over the next, well, the current financing period. So it's 2021, 2027. And well, I haven't done the calculation, but I guess, you know, if you look at clean aviation or collaborative research on aviation, SESAR, I think you would come probably up to 3 billion euros being spent for aviation. So it's not a small part, and it's a big program, and I'm not counting on I will show you, but on other type of research we have. So I think aviation is quite important. It's an important sector in the EU, so we also spend a lot of money for that. Next slide, please. So now I will go more in details about the programs, so the Horizon Europe program, so how we work, and okay, maybe to position a little bit where we are in this program. So you see we have 3 pillars. So the first one is European research area, which is more like upstream research and low TRLs research, which is also some part of it useful for the aviation sector. The pillar 2 is more like working with the industry, where we really try to make things change in the different sectors. And this is the main pillar we use, I would say, for aviation. This is where we finance SESAR. This is where we finance clean aviation. We have also collaborative research for aviation under this pillar. And the third pillar is innovation, European Innovation Council, which is more like for SMEs, which is more like breakthrough research. And here also, you may have things useful for aviation, but this is not where we mainstream aviation. I would say we mainstream aviation under this pillar 2. Yeah, so also it's important for us, I show you this graph because it's important for us to work, to be conscious and to have synergy and to try really to make the whole chain work for the sector of aviation. Next slide, please. So here I will go a little bit more into the, okay, that's what I explained to you, this pillar 2, and go a little bit more in the partnerships. So we have really now a way of working is really to have partnership with the industry. And I think in SESAR, you really know it very well because it's one of this partnership. Yeah, so what I'm dealing with, the main thing that is interesting for SESAR is a clean aviation partnership, because it's also a very big partnership where we try to decarbonize or make the industry climate neutral by 2050. So that's the main goal we have now for the next period. And I showed also, because on the cluster 4, you also have partnerships which are also relevant for us. For instance, well, it's made in Europe. I think it's processed for Europe. Okay. Well, you have a process for planet. Okay, so where you have also some, where you also have some industrialization, digitalization, that kind of things, which are useful for the industry as a whole. Next slide, please. So, I mean, yeah, this is a little bit a buzzword, these synergies, but I think for me, it means more to coordinate with other work streams. So, I mean, we work mainly on the technologies, and it's written Clean Sky 2, but now it will be Clean Aviation for the next period. It was mentioned in the previous presentation, the sustainable aviation fuels are not done by Clean Aviation, because we really concentrate on these breakthrough technologies which were mentioned, hydrogen, hybrid, electric. So that's really something we need to invest a lot, because it's also for it's a lot of efforts, but it should in the long term solve the CO2 and greenhouse gas emission issues of the industry. On sustainable aviation fuel, here I will mention, we have the collaborative research, and I will mention, because this I wanted to mention. I mean, we work, of course, we coordinate among Horizon Europe what we are doing, but also we coordinate with other European instruments, like the Innovation Fund, which is very important for us. You know, the Innovation Fund is covering the EU ETS sectors, so it's covering also aviation. And we had the first call, large-scale call, which was finalized in November. And we saw a lot of refineries projects also. So I think it's also important for sustainable aviation fuels. But we would like to see also more aviation projects in this fund, because so that's why we will our goal is to organize a workshop with the Innovation Fund next year in February, March, and the aviation sector, to really make sure this sector can really benefit and take the opportunity of this huge financing. I mean, next year they will have 3 billion euros to spend, so it's quite some money. And I mean, of course, it's for all the ETS sector, but yeah, I think aviation should also be present here. We also work, for instance, with the EIB, also, of course, with the regional funds. And what's important also for us is to coordinate with member states program, because we have large programs also for aviation, and including also project on sustainable aviation fuel. So it's important. Then the operation, so it's SESAR, it's what we touch now upon. And the market-based measure, they were also mentioned, like EU ETS, CORSIA. Next slide, please. So now I will conclude my presentation with two topics. So one main topic where I think we can cooperate with SESAR, because our goal is really to make the sector climate neutral. And I think climate neutral is different than decarbonized, because we know that, and it was not mentioned in the presentation before, but I think it's an important topic. We know that there are other climate impacts from this sector than the CO2, and this is what we call non-CO2 climate impact. And here we really are working on this. Well, you know, this EASA report, because it's linked also to the EU ETS regulation. And we really want also to come further with research, so to reduce uncertainties, because we know there are quite some uncertainties in this sector, and also to look at mitigation measures. And I think ATM and what SESAR is doing is a very important topic for that, because we know that this non-CO2 climate impact depends a lot on the routes, on the climate condition, or the meteorological conditions, I would say. So here we would like to cooperate further with, and we know also that SESAR has some projects here also. So I think we would like to cooperate further with SESAR on this topic. And I think another topic which is not mentioned on the slide, but which I think is also very relevant, is the digitalization, because we, as I mentioned, we really concentrate on greening the sector, on making it climate neutral, but digitalization is also very important, and I think that's where also SESAR is quite strong. On this note, I will conclude my presentation, and thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you very much for this informative presentation, complementary to the previous one from the union perspective, from the DG research perspective. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to hand over to Dirk, who will explain about the program, the logistics, and most importantly, on how to get the most of this virtual event with the WOVA application. Dirk, can you tell us more?
I can indeed. Thank you, Richard. I thought this was to happen a little later in the session, but that's not a problem. I'll step in right away, and I'll show my screen to give you a very brief overview of what to expect in these SESAR Innovation Days. I'd like to start perhaps by thanking a number of people who contributed to the SESAR Innovation Days this year. Of course, you guys at the SJU, all the participants, the presenters who submitted papers and the posters. But I'd like to specifically thank the program committee. There are 38 people in the program committee, which I have the great pleasure of chairing. And these members represent not only academia, as my Director-General pointed out, they also represent industry. So we have a very good balance here, I think, of academics and operational industry representatives. And the work of the program committee is, of course, to review all the contributions that we receive. So a great word of thanks goes out to all the members of the program committee, 37 plus myself, and it's been a very great pleasure working with these folks. You will see many of them chairing the sessions over the next 3 days. So let me give you some key facts. This is the 11th edition of the SESAR Innovation Days, and whilst I don't have a long history of contradicting my Director-General in public, we have 3 days actually coming along for your pleasure. So it's today, tomorrow, and on Thursday. We are, unfortunately, as you already said, Richard, we are virtual for the second time to go, and we had initially hoped to be able to go to Budapest this year, as we had hoped last year, but this is not gonna happen. It will hopefully happen next year, and I'm certain we all look forward to meeting face to face again. We have 70 papers submitted, 1 withdrawn, and in comparison to previous years, so we had a slightly smaller number in 2020 and about the same number of papers submitted in 2019. The numbers go up and down a little bit always. This is also a function of the different exploratory research programs that ramp up or close out. And so we see a little bit of fluctuation, but nothing to worry about. We have accepted about half of these 37 papers. In comparison, again, we're a little down in comparison to 2020 and 2019. This is not the lowest acceptance rate. We were at 44%, I think, in 2017, but it is a relatively low acceptance rate, and that is an indicator how serious we take our job at the program committee, that we only allow papers into the conference that really are representing good research. We also have 30 posters, and I encourage you to engage with the poster presenters in the dedicated sessions, and I'll come to that in a short minute. We have 12 technical sessions, so where the 37 papers that have been accepted for presentation at the conference can be seen. We have 1 quiz tomorrow evening, which I look very much forward to. We have 2 winners of the Young Scientist Award, and I don't tell you who they are, of course. This is a surprise you will have to wait for until the last day and the closing afternoon of the Thursday. We have 3 exhibition talks where the 30 posters already mentioned can be seen. And we have an attendance, and this number we will have to communicate later. At the moment, I think I see 190. This is good. We have about 1,000 registrations or even more than that. So I look forward to more people coming into the technical sessions. So just to give you a brief overview of what the 3 days to come will be looking like. We have, we're right in the welcoming and opening session. We have a subsequent session from the Engaged Knowledge Transfer Network, which is closing out by the end of this year. We will not have my program overview, but we will go into the comfort break after the Engage Knowledge Transfer Network has presented. And we then in the afternoon have 4 technical paper sessions with 3 papers in each, separated by a coffee break. And we also have the first exhibition talk. So half an hour in which, guided by the application, you can look at the different posters and engage with the poster presenters. Tomorrow, we will start again at 10 o'clock with a welcome by Richard and myself. We'll have a keynote and then a first plenary session where we will be talking about multimodality. I quite like the title here, multimodality. Why is it taking so long? We've been talking about this for quite some time, and I look forward to this very interesting session moderated by Andrew from Westminster. We have a comfort break and then exhibition talks. Again, 4 technical sessions in the afternoon. One of those sessions has 4 papers, the other sessions have 3 papers. And then our SESAR Innovation Days quiz. Those of you who were present last year already saw a quiz. We have more interesting questions this time around. And I think there's also a prize. So I really look forward to that. And I encourage you to stay until the end on Wednesday, tomorrow. Tomorrow, we have a second plenary session after our welcome about artificial intelligence and how it is transforming the aviation industry. We have 4 technical sessions again in the afternoon, or one before the coffee break and the lunch break, I apologize, and one after. And then we give the prize for the Young Scientist Award, and we have a closing session. So unlike the plenary sessions, the technical sessions take place in a parallel fashion. So you will have to choose whether you go to one or the other, but you can swap between the sessions at any point, which allows you to see, for example, the first presentation in one session and then the second presentation in the other session. And the Hoover application will guide you to doing that. So what you have just seen here above on my 3 previous slides is much more nicely also visible in the Hoover application. Hoover can be installed as an application on your cell phone. It can also be seen on your desktop. And I think the fact that you are here shows that you were successful in doing so. I suggest having it on both applications, both on your cell phone and on the desktop. Follow the sessions on the desktop, but use the cell phone for some additional things that you can do. For example, look at the CVs of the speakers and engage in the chat and so on. So a big part of the SESAR Innovation Days, of course, are these 37 papers that will be presented in 12 technical sessions, the technical papers. And I would like to give a very brief explanation what to expect there. The technical sessions all last an hour and a half, with the exception of one, which is slightly longer, and that may mislead you to believe that there are 30 minutes per presentation. That's not the case. We have allocated 15 minutes for the presentation, plus 10 minutes for the question and answer session afterwards. And the reason that the 3 times 25 still add up to an hour and a half is that we have posted teaser presentations at the end of each session. So these posted teasers are 1-minute presentations, very short, just to make you curious about each of the posters. And we have a certain number of teasers per session. So you won't see 30 teasers in each session. They are allocated to the technical sessions that they most match with. We will be rather strict on timekeeping. The reason for that is that we would like you to be able to swap between the different technical sessions so as to see, for example, in session 1, you could see the first presentation, you can see the second presentation in session 2, and so forth. And that, of course, only works if we stick to the time. The session chairs will be there in the session. They will introduce the session, the speaker, and they will also manage the question and answer session. So in order to do that, we encourage you to post the questions in the Q&A. So they will there be, you can also upvote questions that look like questions you would have liked to ask yourself, but they're already typed there. And the upvoted question move up in the stack and then allow the session chair, of course, to select those questions which seem to be most interesting for the audience. The papers are all available for download on the SIDS website, so you can do some preparatory reading if you want. You can also, the papers will stay there, and you can also access them after the conference, as you can all the papers that have ever been published in the SESAR Innovation Days. So we have an open publication policy, and all the contributions are on the website for 2021 and for all the previous editions. And we would like to ask the session chairs and the presenters, please, to join the session 15 minutes earlier than the published start time. The reason for that is so we can have a final shakedown between the session chair, the presenters, and also the webmasters. Make sure everything works, screen sharing, and your presentation is there, and all the rest of it. So please, in your sessions, be there 15 minutes earlier than the published start time. So that would normally be during the coffee break or during the lunch break. So that should work out. And I think with that, I thank you and hand back to Richard.
Dirk, I see that Richard is left.
Okay, Richard is gone. So what I suggest we do is we hand over right into the next session. So the next session is on the Knowledge Transfer Network Engage, which is a 4-year network that was funded by the SESAR Joint Undertaking in the exploratory research call of SESAR 22. And the presentation is entitled The Engage KTN Achievements, Lessons, and Legacies. And it will be presented by 3 people. There is Andrew Cook from the University of Westminster. He's a professor in air traffic management at the University of Westminster in London. We have Paola Lopez, who is the program manager of INAXIS. INAXIS is a research foundation in Madrid. And I also have Graham Tanner, also from the University of Westminster, down here as a speaker. And it's my pleasure to hand over and give the word to Andrew Cook.
Thank you very much indeed, Dirk. Can I just check that you can hear me and that you can see my screen in full mode?
Affirmative on both counts.
Thank you very much indeed. Excellent. So thank you for the introduction, Dirk. Much appreciated. Paula and myself are delighted to share some slides with you today on achievements, lessons, and a little bit of the legacy from the Engage KTN. Very brief overview of the discussion, the presentation today. A quick review of the KTN itself. One of the main focus of the slides is going to be the Catalyst Fund projects. This has been a lot of work over the 4 years. 18 projects, 31 unique partners, 88 assessments from the mentors in the KTN. We're going to do a live demonstration of the Engage Wiki. I'm very much looking forward to that from my colleague Paula. Some slides on the PhDs in summer school, and concluding with some lessons, legacy, and looking ahead. The Engage is actually the SESAR Knowledge Transfer Network. It's looked after by the 8 partners. You can see there, enormous thanks to everyone for the fantastic work over the 4 years contributed to everybody. It's being coordinated by ourselves at University of Westminster. All the information that you see today is available on the Engage website. And there's actually a migration of a lot of this material into the Engage Wiki, which will have a dedicated demonstration later on during this presentation. We also have 60 or so industry partners in Engage. If you're interested in becoming part of this community going forward, we'd still like to hear from you. There's information on the Engage website exactly about what that entails. And we'd be very happy to have a chat with you and get you to sign up into being involved in this community going forward. So we keep that momentum. So to summarize what Engage is all about in one slide, on the left-hand side there, you can see that we've devised a number of thematic challenges which underpin the KTN. I'll talk a little bit about where those came from in a moment. And at the bottom, that arrow is all about integrating industrial research and exploratory research. So these two things underpin everything that we've done in the KTN. We set out to establish a one-stop European knowledge hub, which is now the Engage Wiki. You'll be hearing about that in a few moments. We've contributed to the SESAR Innovation Days, largely thanks to the fantastic work from Dirk and the Programme Committee. We didn't want to be too disruptive of this, since we thought it was already rather excellent. We have tried to get a higher involvement from industry into the Innovation Days. We've run a series of thematic challenge workshops supporting our thematic challenges. We've run a series of summer schools, more on those later, which and supporting our fantastic 10 PhDs. Catalyst funds I'll be telling you about in a moment. And we're producing 65 deliverables, sharp intake of breath. You'll be pleased to know that I'm only going to tell you about 2 of them. And that's deliverable 3.6 and 3.9 that we're calling our legacy deliverables. And I'm going to conclude with that at the end of the little talk today. We're also supporting the future ATM skilled workforce with some of the initiatives you can see there written at the bottom of the slide. And we see this as quite a good foundation, hopefully, for supporting the SESAR Digital Academy going forward. The thematic challenges were suggested and proposed by you, the community, and the industry partners, right at the start of the network back in January 2018. Through the awards board, working with the consortium, we decided on the best 4 thematic challenges to pursue. These were basically ideas which weren't being investigated in great depth by SESAR at that time. So these are the challenges that we took forward for deeper exploration. We had some dedicated workshops around these each year, and some of these were associated with the SIDS and the summer school. This also led to a call for 18 Catalyst Fund projects. These were intended basically to accelerate the state of the art regarding the thematic challenge topics themselves. We had 18 projects, and by Horizon 2020 rules, we were allowed to fund these up to a maximum of €60,000 each. So these were fairly small, light touch projects with small bursts of activity over 12 months. And the objective was basically to migrate the state of the art to a higher TRL. That's going to be pretty much a focus of the presentation this morning from me. And these were let over 2 calls in 2018 and 2020 and decided through an independent awards board. Here are the thematic challenges that we eventually settled with. Thematic challenge 1 is the vulnerability and CNS vulnerability and security. 2 is looking at data-driven trajectory prediction. 3, efficient use of metadata. And 4, novel market mechanisms in ATM. You can see there the workshops undertaken, the most recent ones in 2021, and the person responsible in the network for looking after each of these thematic challenges. All the information is on the Engage website and the corresponding presentations, and the new research ideas from these challenges has fed our deliverable 3.6. More on that at the end. So now to tell you a little bit about the Catalyst Fund projects themselves. I'm going to give you, over the next 20 minutes or so, before I hand to Paula, some illustrative examples in no order of preference. First of all, a flavour of the breadth and depth of what we did with the Catalyst Fund projects. Second, I'm going to give you a bit of a deeper insight into 4 particular projects. I'd like to thank enormously all the Catalyst Fund teams who sent me some slides today. I hope I haven't messed them up too much. Apologies if I have, but thank you very much for the fantastic contributions. There's going to be a fuller slide pack at the end of this pack that we distribute and post on the website, where all the materials are to be found on the Engage website. And please watch out, of course, for the associated SIDS papers. So, Catalyst Fund projects overview. Essentially, this is the breakdown of the activities in the 4 thematic challenges over the PhDs and the 2 ways of Catalyst funding. You can see a bit more focus on thematic challenges 2 and 3, whereas a little bit more of a foundation of research going on. There were 9 and 8 activities in those respectively. Overall, at the peak, the coordinator was managing 28 contracts for these 18 projects and the 10 PhDs. And you can see on the right-hand side, the Wave 2 thematic Catalyst Fund projects, which closed in 2021. We decided, by the way, as a consortium, that we would make ourselves ineligible for this funding so that all of these packets of 60,000 euros were given back out to the research community. And this was a decision we made to make sure that that money was going back out to the community. In fact, only 35% of the total funding of 4 million euros for the whole of the KTN is actually consumed by the consortium partners themselves. The rest, the majority, is going back out to the community in terms of funding PhDs and Catalyst Fund projects, for example. So a quick overview. I'm going to talk a little bit, this is the flavor, what we did in Thematic Challenge 4, some small acorns, some great oaks grew from those. A couple of slides on one of our open projects, FC2A, some insights into the methodology of the Pu40p project using synthetic data, and a rather high TRL reached by our OPAS project, both latterly here in TC3 on metadata. There'll be more slides in the pack that we distribute. Thematic Challenge 4 started off in the good old days when we were able to, remember when we could meet people in real life? We had a workshop here at the University of Westminster. I haven't been there myself for several years now. This was in October 2018. This was the first workshop. This was followed by a call for proposals for thematic challenges in November 18, the following month. And exactly 1 year later, we all met in Madrid to have a presentation on the excellent project led by Eamonn, exploring UDPP concepts through computational behavioral economics. The next workshop, the second one in TC4, quite a small thematic challenge, was centered around the work from Think, Research and Consultancy on their rather wonderful ROMIAD Catalyst Fund project. We were delighted to invite and have present on our panel at this project a number of SESAR ER4 projects, Beacon, Cadenza, Slot Machine, and Ithaca. And a number of these projects in ER4 had roots one way or another in Thematic Challenge 4. All of the results from all of these workshops are presented and summarized in our legacy deliverable D3.6, as I'll explain at the end. A quick overview into a flavor of some of these projects. FC2A was one of our open projects. This was aiming to evaluate whether flight-centric ATC with airstreams was a promising approach for emerging dynamic airspace configuration management. The objectives were to look at complementing and supporting free route and dynamic airspace configuration approaches, to define initial characteristics of airstream structure, and basically to assess whether traffic structural complexity could be reduced. It used the PIRATS tool from ENAC with some rather nice stakeholder surveys and operational interfaces with industry actors. So to answer its questions, there was indeed a 42% reduction in structural traffic complexity with the use of the airstreams. 65% of eligible traffic was captured by the aggregation mechanism, which was really rather encouraging. They were also successful in development of a demonstrator, the so-called Airstream Factory, and this supported the TRL maturation up to a technical solution and the basis for initialization of an operational mock-up. So congratulations on that, and they're going forward to reach a higher TRL already in future follow-up activities. The Pu40p project, this was a proof of concept for development of a data-driven methodology for the prediction of flight trajectories. You can see here in blue at the top, the 5 input variables used as predictors. They were using state-of-the-art machine learning and data mining algorithms, essentially focused at the pre-tactical stage of operations. And the idea here was to develop something which could be used to support planning of demand capacity balancing. So among the state-of-the-art algorithms investigated, some of the key findings were that, for example, decision trees were really rather good at classification of flight plans, whereas random forests showed the lowest errors for estimation of the duration. So it's horses for courses and choosing particular types of technology and approach to give the best results with specific focus on specific outcomes. They also were very successful in the use and generation of synthetic data within this project. And this is a theme coming across a number of the thematic challenge workshops, and something I'll talk about a little bit at the end in one of the conclusions that we've taken forward into our legacy deliverable 3.6. OPAS project was led by the Royal Belgian Institute for Space Aeronomy with the partners Eurocontrol and Rolls-Royce. They were looking at development of a SWIM technical infrastructure, service providing notification and data access for volcanic plume heights. So the objective was an implementation of early warning system, building on an existing service, and to design, define, and publish this as part of the SWIM registry notification service. That's on the yellow profile. Some of the key results here were already at last year's SIDS, a rather nice paper based on the validation, which was already presenting work at TRL4. This year, the work has been taken forward, produced actually a paper on the benefits of the early warning system published in NHESS, taking that now already up to TRL5. I would encourage you to take a look at the SWIM registry. The link is there on the website, on the slide, and you can see the OPAS project already active in this notification service, a really super achievement. That was to give you a flavour of some of the breadth of what's gone on as part of the Super Catalyst Fund projects. I'm now going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into 4 of them before I hand over to my colleague Paola for our demo of the Wiki. So we're going to look at the Safe Drone Flight project in TC1, the data-driven approach for dynamic and adaptive trajectory prediction in TC2. Then we're going to look at the Metis project using drones as an aerial sensor network, a really sexy project. And then WEPA, which was the weather impact prediction tool for ATM. So Safe Drone Flights, this was led by NATS in association with their project partner, the Open University. The objective here was to develop and assess a novel drone surveillance concept, which uses mobile phones as portable drone detectors, which is really cool, and leveraging cybersecurity mechanisms of blockchain technology. The methodology here, you can see essentially the prototype assessment and scenario planning, both fed into the evaluation and validation phases. And the key results, the ones I've shown in pink, are what the mentors from the Engage KTM particularly liked with this project. One was the in-depth use cases. There were 9 use space operational cases were created with both nominal and nominal scenarios. They also explored safety insurance and hazard assessment to deduce the integrity requirements. Cybersecurity and digital trust were investigated for future surveillance systems. 2 rather nice workshops, both for dissemination and validation. And again, particularly picked up by the mentors here, shown in pink, was the prototype development and the concept maturation. So the project had a self-assessed, based on a software prototype, reaching level of TRL4. They successfully simulated and detected a detection of drones in several use space scenarios, recording locations securely to a blockchain. And in terms of the suitability application, it was identified suitability for short-term duration surveillance of operations in lower VLL airspace, with some potential applications shown here. Quite an interesting and pertinent one based on what we've heard in the news over the last few years regarding airport security. The next steps are to try and get further funding to take this forward and test an industrial application through a series of further small-scale validation exercises. An academic paper is already being drafted, and an industrial application of some of these findings are being taken forward within NATS, specifically to inform new airspace user data assurance. Now to have a look at the second one, the Diapason project. This is a data-driven approach for dynamic and adaptive trajectory prediction. This was led by CREDA, working with Deep Blue and Xenobytes. The objective here was the methodology for trajectory prediction and traffic forecasting in the pre-tactical phase. It was a data-driven project, the outcomes based on data analysis, dynamic in terms of it being adjusted to different planning horizons, and adaptive in terms of it being enhanced iteratively with new tactical data. And as a second pass, this was validated in a DCB use case using combined trajectories. So the key results from part one, the predictive framework, was essentially looking at prediction over different time horizons with respect to EOBT, a really large data set. That was one operational data set. Interesting for me and really quite surprising was that the unpredictability of most airlines was systematic enough to become predictable. And if you don't believe that, have a look at the really nice reporting from this project, where these are very elegantly described by the consortium in their reporting, a really interesting finding. It's possible to estimate the probability of the change for every flight and then apply that into demand forecasting. This project also reached its target level of TRL4. In terms of the DCB use case, this was looking at how predictions could be integrated into strategic planning process at the network management level. It described the differences in occupancy counts per sector, the difference between the real data and that from the predictive framework. The vertical profile in this case was estimated to consider the 4D trajectories. There was 6 days of data tested, and this was basically now focused on the Spanish airspace. So some of the conclusions coming from the project was that the methodology was both valid and useful, although highly sensitive to input data. They concluded that DDR data didn't really, wasn't fully suitable since it didn't include flight plan updates, a common issue with respect to use of DDR data. The expectations with respect to the use case were slightly higher than observed, despite considering a large number of factors. And again, an interesting conclusion here that echoes what we heard a bit from the Pu40p project, was that there isn't a one-size-fits-all trajectory prediction methodology, at least not at this stage, which is a really interesting take-home message, I find. They also found in particular that they need vertical profile data needed for the application. There was really good benefits brought from operational staff guidance and the vision that that brought to the practical value of the project. So the next steps are to improve the accuracy in the low resolution scenarios and to refine the tool for better presentation of the results, although in my opinion, the presentation of these are already looking pretty good, but they're going to refine that even further. Next of the 4 is the Metis Project. This was led by NLR with AirHub. The advisory board was TU Delft and the Royal Dutch Met Institute. So this was to determine the accuracy of the concepts at the presence of static obstacles to estimate low altitude winds below 500 feet, and to determine how low altitude wind information should be communicated to drone operators within a U-space system. So the concept was using drones as aerial sensor network for low altitude hyperlocal wind nowcasting, summarized rather nicely in these 3 steps. So step 1 is using airborne drones to give instantaneous wind states and transmit that information to a ground station. The ground station then uses the meteo particle model to estimate wind field in real time. And in step 3, the ground station then communicates that wind field data to drone operators via the U-Space Weather Information Service. The key results that this was feasible. On average, the speed predictions were reasonably accurate. It was very rather promising. One issue they found was that some challenges caused by propeller-induced flow over the sensors. Future research is looking to increase the scalability and accuracy, and they're looking for partners with whom to cooperate. They've got a very nice SIDS paper this year It's in fact SIDS paper 88. If you'd like to attend and listen to that, you'll hear some more information and some nice presentations are planned here on how the wind observations and particle initialization was then used to construct the wind field constructed from the particles, and how this was then used to construct the estimation of the confidence of those wind fields. Some really nice presentation and translation of these data into confidence fields. You get some also nice insights into the technical work behind this project in terms of the work, for example, in the wind tunnel testing of the Foxtech Hover-1 drone. And last and certainly not least, a couple of slides on the WIPA project. This was a weather impact prediction tool for ATM. This was a project from France Aviation Civil Service and MetSafe. The ambition here was to provide weather hazards impact information for flow management. There were 3 steps: a use case definition, to look at the delivery of a tool as SWIM web service, and then technical and operational validation with air traffic controllers. The expected benefits from the projects were basically to improve anticipation of hazardous weather on capacity, and therefore to deploy better use of weather regulations and better use of the airspace. Some of the key results here were producing thunderstorm impact predictions per hour, per sector, with a 24-hour plus look ahead. And really rather strong in this project was the operational validation, which was undertaken at the 8 and ATC rooms during the spring and summer of this year. Some of the key results from the technical validation, which is over 15 reference days, was that there was a behavioural difference between the med and continental areas. So local tuning was needed to get a good idea of weather impact. ATM complexity was needed to be introduced to model and include ATM hotspots. And it was concluded there was a need also for an automated post-ops analysis tool. From the operational validation, it was concluded there was a different operational approach to hazardous weather between the AICS and RANS ATCOs. This was really interesting for me because it took me back to my days a long time ago looking at continuous descent approaches back in a number of ATC centres around Europe. And it was really surprising and striking how that differed from different centres and indeed from shift to shift, depending on who was on shift at the time. So an echo there for me of some other findings across a number of other projects, really interesting. Some strengths of the tools with the hourly update of the forecast and the power of the lightning impact information on the sectors, and indeed the success of better anticipation of ATC workload. The next, some conclusions were that after an adaptation period, this type of tool could actually be used, this type of probabilistic methodology could be used by ATCOs quite comfortably. Collaboration, therefore, with ATC was crucial, and that cloud and SWIM-based solutions are suitable for ATM pre-TAC operations. The next steps were looking at validation in Reims and Marseille, UACs. So I think this concluded actually in November. Looking at extension to other MET phenomena, such as icing and CAT, and indeed looking to an industrialization, and congratulations on that with Vigio Aero, an operational weather impact service from MetSafe. Okay, to wind up on the Catalyst Fund project, some lessons learned, and these are all reported in our deliverable 3.6. I'm having given you now our 20 minutes insight into the Catalyst Fund projects. Just some reviews from the projects and from the coordinator. So the project feedback essentially was the light touch approach was effective. It allowed an efficient use of the resource allocation. So there's a better ratio of doing research with a low deliverable and reporting overhead. And we got some nice feedback saying that the support from the KTN mentors was also appreciated. We required at the proposal stage that there was a really solid plan for integrating industry through the project. So that was a requirement at the proposal stage. And this was found to be really effective by the actual projects themselves, and that this was a prerequisite for the project, that this was already in place and an integral part of the project. And overall, it was a good instrument, we were told in the feedback, in that the projects did what they said on the tin, in that they work well as catalyst mechanisms to take the state of the art forward. It allowed flexibility in a relatively low risk budgetary environment. And one negative aspect was that some of the reporting requirements could have been advised by the coordinator, that's University of Westminster, that was our fault, a bit earlier on in the process. We were learning on our feet a little bit as we went along. We did launch these projects in 2018 pretty promptly, in order that we could fit both waves in to the KTN. And we think we got that a little bit better in wave 2, once we had fine-tuned the reporting requirements and the various templates. From the coordinator, that's University of Westminster, it was quite a complex task setting up the 18 legal contracts and the invoicing process through the university. That did take quite an overhead from the coordinator in terms of looking after all that. Due to the batch nature of the evaluation, sometimes there are a few delays on our side in terms of processing those through all the mentors in the consortium. Overall, though, we have to say it was a really positive experience. We enjoyed immensely working with all of these Catalyst Fund projects, and enjoyed having them participate in our series of workshops every year, a workshop for each thematic challenge each year. It was a lot of work. We really enjoyed working with the projects. And above all, we think that the projects delivered enormously high value for money. For 60,000 euros for each of these projects, they were absolutely superb, very ambitious, and by and large delivering on those superb ambitions. Now we're going to move to the Engage Wiki, and we're going to have a live demonstration from my colleague Paola, who's been waiting patiently to come onto the stage and talk you through the Wiki. The Wiki has produced a number of firsts. These have been demand-led by you, the research community, so it's based around on things that we've been told that the research community would like to see delivered. We hope we've done that. We hope this is a really key part of the legacy that we leave after Engage for the research community going forward, and indeed that this could be a good foundation for future support and development of the SESAR Digital Academy. The materials on 426 projects, nearly 2,000 deliverables are already in the research repository and being used as part of the analysis. If you'd like to have a little play with the Wiki, perhaps you could, the link is in the Wover chat. Perhaps you could play with it after Paula's done a demonstration, just so we don't get loads of notification messages popping up during Paula's presentation. But there is a link in the chat, and there will be future steps, what we're going to do next, or what could be done next with regard to the Wiki at the end in my presentation. But now you've heard more than enough from me, and I'm going to hand over to Paola for a demonstration of the Wiki. Over to you, Paola. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, all the organizers. I think for sharing my screen, you need to stop sharing yours. Thank you. Yes. Do you now see it?
Yes, we see it.
Brilliant, thank you. So yes, thank you very much. As Andrew was explaining, this has been developed by the Engage partners. It gathers together a different number of features that I will be showing now. This is a live demo, so I'm just accessing the URL you see here. So wikiengagektn.com. KTN stands for Knowledge Transfer Network. So just by accessing this URL, you will see exactly what I'm seeing now. So I'm accessing now with a visitor's, let's say, account. So you don't need to log in or register or anything to see the material that I will be showing in this demo. But in order to access an enhanced number of features and in order to be able to contribute to the wiki and to update its content, you can request an account, and we warmly invite you to do so. It's just a very simple form that you need to fill up. After doing so, we will receive your request, and after checking that you actually belong to this community, we will approve your account, and you will have access to contribute to the wiki and to update a number of parts of the wiki that I will be explaining one by one. So if we start by these 5 main features that you have under this white background, we can, for instance, start by the interactive research map of ATM. In this map that I'm partly showing now, it's now getting order, great. This is the result of an exercise we do over 362 projects, and in particular 1,440 deliverables and reports corresponding to these projects, plus around 650 conference papers. So we have performed a natural language processing exercise over these hundreds of projects. And this is the result in form of an interactive dashboard that you can play with. Each of these white dots or nodes correspond to a cluster. You can click on the white nodes and you see the keywords that characterize this cluster. So all these projects have been classified by thematic similarity, right? These are the keywords corresponding to cluster 1, for instance, which is this one, this red one. Each of the color dots that you can also click on them, for instance, if you click on this one, it corresponds to one single project. So each of the color dots correspond to one project. In this case, is options on high-level architecture. You can see here the detail of the project, or for instance, you can click on another one. You can access the website of this project, which is Project Ample, and you can also access with a direct link that belongs to the repository of the wiki to each of the documents that have been analyzed in this natural language processing model. You can also use this filter by using keywords that might be relevant for your research. If we go back to the homepage, the next feature is the European University programs. This is a database that we consider it's very useful for those students, both postgraduate or undergraduate students willing to perform some studies, for instance, abroad their countries. They can filter by country, by the institution, by the type of degree. For instance, if I want to study some studies in Italy, I can search what is in Italy, and 3 masters are listed here for 2 years each with some details on each of those masters. Then if you're a representative of a student of a university, and you would like to update the information of the studies listed here, or you would like to add a new study that you're missing and your university is offering, you can just click in here, add a program for accessing this, as this is something that needs to be edited. You need to request an account and log in, as I said at the beginning of my presentation. But just by completing this form and submitting it with this author account, as I said, you can provide your information about the university course you want to see promoted in the wiki, in the Engage wiki. We go back to the home page. I will skip this one for a while and go to the discussion forum. In the discussion forum, this is a forum as you are used to. We have proposed 4 topics that correspond exactly to the thematic challenges that Andrew presented before, but you can also find some open topics that you could contribute to it. In order to visit the discussions that are going on, you don't need to create an account, but in order to participate in the discussion, you do need to log in, as I said at the beginning. Then we go again to the home, and you can also access the full list of projects and papers that have been used for the natural language processing exercise. You see the full list of deliverables, reports, and conference papers, which is around, it's nearly like 2,000 documents that you can access here and that you can filter by different criteria. For instance, if you're interested in the most recent ones, you can use this years filter. It gets automatically filtered. and you see this filter view of projects belonging to these last 3-4 years of SESAR. And finally, I will click on the ATM concepts roadmap that you will see in a timeline how the different SESAR calls starting by 2011 up to 2021, up to the current moment. Throughout the years, how do they contribute, or how these projects funded under these calls are clustered in these clusters that you see here. So you see optimizing and complexity techniques, large-scale demonstration, safety, resilient automation, etc. These are the clusters that I presented before in the interactive map that have been just given a title according to the keywords that characterize that cluster. So you see how these calls are funded a number of projects that are clustered in these ones. If you click on any of them, if you click, for instance, on these ones, which of the industrial research are researching about CNS system, you click on here and you get filter 27 projects belonging to this link. You can do the same. We have to also natural language processing analysis in order to match these clusters, this topic that have been automatically identified with the strategic research agenda of SESAR that is proposing a number of topics like aviation Green Deal or artificial intelligence for aviation, and how does the already started projects or already even funded and finalized project are contributing to the state of the art of those topics that SESAR is fostering for SESAR 3. That is in the timeline of 2030 objectives. And we are also going a little bit much looking forward, a little bit more longer term research for 2040. This is a work that will be completed in the next, I could say month, but weeks even. And Andrew will be presenting later on, which is the Horizon flagship activities, which are more, let's say, forward-looking approach into future research that engage would like to promote with an expert, let's say, after an expert's analysis on these topics. In addition to this, you can access some additional features that you find on the bottom of the page, like PhD funding opportunities or jobs and internship boards. These are boards where you can also promote your own jobs, internships, PhDs opportunities that you would like to share with the community to receive candidates and to have like an additional promotional channel for this particular community. You can also find a link to the SESAR Digital Academy, and you can also access teaching resources, which are basically coming from the summer schools organized by Engage. And you can access this, but for this, again, you need to have an approved account. So I think this is it from my side, Andrew. Not sure if you're missing something, just let me know. Do you have my contact details again? So we will help any of the audience that needs some, that would like to have some clarification. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Paula. Absolutely excellent. Very much appreciated the nice tour of the Wiki. And thanks in particular to Inaxis and to you, Del, for all the work that's gone into producing that fantastic tool. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you.
So I'm now going to finish off with a few fairly brief slides, looking at the summer schools and a little bit of the legacy and where we go next with Engage. So just a few more slides to round off. Can I just check that you can see me in full screen and hear me okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed. Excellent. So PhDs and summer school. We recently had our summer school in the end of August, start of September of this year. So just a few slides here because we've just had a whole week dedicated with some really good attendance there. So just a bit of a summary of where we are. The 10 PhD abstracts are all available on the Engage website, and we're in the process of updating that information as we speak. There will be further and fuller reporting on the PhDs in 2022. So it's just a recap today of where we are, but I would encourage you to take a little look at the website for further information. The summer school started off in 2019 in Belgrade, again in the days when we had the pleasure of real life events with real people. Really splendid hosting from our colleagues at University of Belgrade. This was basically focused around tutorials for our wonderful PhD candidates, nearly all of whom were completely new to air traffic management, coming from a number of disciplines. So it was based on tutorials imparting new knowledge to our PhD candidates about ATM, scientific methodologies, and air transport in general. By 2020, we were already thrust into the world of virtual realities, unfortunately, and we couldn't build on the lovely event we had in Belgrade. We were moved into this virtual context. What we did here was an intentional change of shift a little bit, in that now with rather mature work with regard to the PhDs, each PhD candidate was a discussant in a more extended presentation of another PhD. So we paired them all up. Each one gave a presentation, and then a PhD candidate colleague was discussant of that PhD. So this was a really nice way, we felt, to get some interaction between our PhDs. And there were still a number of tutorials from industry partners as part of this summer school in 2020, which was virtual instead of being in Luxembourg. In 2021, we had hoped a few months ago to be in Trieste, and the SJU were going to fund an enormous firework display to celebrate the end of Engage. Unfortunately, this didn't come to pass. We didn't go to Trieste. There were no fireworks. We were still in the virtual environment. We did adapt the again, by intention and design right at the start, the way that this summer school was run. We now had much longer presentations from the PhDs. We're now at a really quite mature stage, some of them even finalizing their PhDs activities now. And they made a presentation to an industry panel of experts for each PhD to discuss how the PhD could be taken forward in an operational context. This is the program. Actually, the paired up PhDs, we gave them an hour and 15 to present in paired presentations, and then an extended 1 hour discussion, then panel discussions for each of these PhD pairings, led by a moderator from the Engage consortium. Normally, the mentor of one or both of these PhDs, the supporting mentor from the Engage KTN. So each PhD has dedicated mentoring support from the KTN, in addition to their wonderful main supervisors, of course. The stuff in blue, other activities presented throughout the workshop, for example, presentation on the Engage throughout the summer school, for example, on the Engage Wiki. We had a session on Future European Digital Academy, and then we had a nice presentation at the end from Dirk on future research horizons. We had a really lively and busy week. The fifth day was dedicated to one of our technical challenge workshops. We had 97 registrations and participation from folks from 20 countries or so. I'd like to thank again enormously the amazing selection of people from industry who gave up a lot of their time to be involved in these 1 hour panels dedicated to each of these PhD sessions. It was one of the most pleasurable experiences of the KTN. I wish I'd been there in real life. Was the number of emails we got from the panelists and the Engaged PhD saying how much they enjoyed that experience. It was a really nice atmosphere of cooperative feedback and discussion with the folks from industry who really know what's going on with regard to these individual challenges and PhD topics. And it was super to be able to involve the PhDs and put them directly in touch with these experts from industry. And I know a number of these discussions and dialogues have been continued since then. So many thanks indeed to all the panelists for their participation in the summer school. So to round off with a few slides on a few lessons learned, legacy, and a little bit of a look ahead from Engage. It's now in the process of wrapping up. I've said already that we're producing 2 legacy deliverables. By that we mean deliverables which we think will be of particular interest, we sincerely hope, to the research community going forward. We're under no illusion that anyone's going to read anywhere near the 6 to 8 deliverables produced, but we would like to draw attention to 2 of them. And these will, of course, become public and published in various places once they've been approved, hopefully by our colleagues at SJU. We've only just submitted them, so there'll be a little while before they're approved in their final versions, we anticipate. The first one, D39, is on the Engage Wiki. So this is basically the functionality and a user manual from what you've just seen presented by Paula. It explains the data sources in the wiki and the functionality of the repository. It tells you in detail how that interactive map was built and how to use it, how we derive the clusters. It explains the concepts roadmap and the detailed relationship with the SRIA. It tells you a little bit about the Horizon flagships. These were the things on the right-hand side of the map. This is our seeding of some future-oriented research ideas to put those on the landscape for future investigation. So a little bit of a look ahead over the horizon of the SRIA, for example, concepts such as strong AI. More information on the university programs, the teaching resources led by our superb colleagues at Belgrade in terms of producing those free-to-use teaching resources and lectures available to download from the wiki, and how you can post internships and PhD calls. So how to do all that information is in the deliverable, but all those instructions on how to do that are already on the wiki itself, as Paula said. We've got full provision to maintain the wiki through 2022. We're not going to pull the plug at the end of December. In fact, we're going to continue working on that by producing and publishing some promotional videos, and we have provision in place for handover of the wiki to SJU. There are detailed lessons in Deliverable 3.9, for example, how to maintain such a wiki, for example, to make it robust against attack. And we've got some proposals for next steps that might be considered. One idea is we'd like to really propose that these discussion fora in the wiki might be a really nice place to discuss, propose ideas and some of the topics in the upcoming call from SESAR 3 for exploratory research. Let's see how that develops, and that will be in the hands of our SJU colleagues on how we take some of those aspects forward. Deliverable 3.6 is our opportunities for innovative ATM research. So these are our ideas for how we take forward some of the research ideas and opportunities developed in the KTN through the 4 years. This is based on 3 pillars, the first of which is a gap analysis of the existing corpus of work. This is based on a forward cluster gap analysis of all the work in the ATM concepts roadmap that Paula just presented. We used a multi-dimensional vectorization, basically an autoencoder, and then the outputs from this were interpreted by experts to produce a gap analysis with 7 suggested threads for research, which could be picked up again, which has fallen off a little bit off the radar potentially currently. We then take forward a number of ideas on the center pillar from the thematic challenges, where I've presented those to you and some of the projects involved in those and all the workshops. So we've got 4 years of workshops to write up and present some key findings and thoughts on thematic challenges to be taken forward for future research as pillar 2. And pillar 3 are the Horizon flagships. This looking over the horizon, looking at complementary flagships to the SRIA flagships, to some things that we've put on the research map for future investigation, which might come to the fore in a longer term time frame. For example, strong AI, contributions from quantum computing and things such as virtual interlining. In Deliverable 3.6, which will be published on approval, we also discuss the practicalities of how these research themes and these three pillars can be taken forward together. And for example, getting the balance right between expert-led and data-driven ideation. We also propose a number of research enablers to support future work for these type of activities in future activities, which might be picked up in SESAR 3, for example. So these research enablers are proposing activities regarding data and code issues, for example, regarding access, data access, always an issue. We've made some proposals for a licensing framework and use of synthetic data, always a hot topic. Data, of course, driving research has come through on all our thematic challenges and workshops. We think at the end of the day, all this research is about community collaboration. It's about people, networks, and keeping some of the momentum of the work going. We've made a number of proposals on new community collaboration ideas. We've made some suggestions on extending the state of the art regarding some of the SESAR KPIs, and COVID-19, necessity being the mother of invention, some really nice work emerging on distributed and remote simulations enforced due to the pandemic. We've made some suggestions as to how those could be taken forward in the future also. We also have a section on research platforms, so some possibilities for how the wiki could be taken forward if SJU decides to take that pathway. Some recommendations on how we can improve the flow, consolidation and recency of project reporting and up-to-dateness of these data in resources such as repositories and wikis. And a number of conclusions from the format and implementation of virtual workshops based on the 4 years of experience, or let's say 2.5, particularly of working in the virtual environment and trying to adapt and improve those workshops based on feedback from the community as we've gone along. So there's a number of detailed lessons learned across the KTN, which are reported in the quite extensive deliverable 3.6. As I say, that will be published on approval for the entire research community. Also important to engage is, of course, active dissemination. And we mean as opposed to passive dissemination and pushing information. The activity and the way that we can disseminate research results through the wiki, through interactive research map and the concepts roadmap, as well as actual direct pushing below the line out to the research community. We're producing a report on that on our dissemination and communication activities in 2022 as we're in the rounding up phase of the KTN. On the note of dissemination, I've been asked by our super colleagues at Icrap to give you a heads up on the forthcoming Icrap Conference. The deadline for papers is Sunday, 13 February. This is hopefully going to be a physical conference at University of South Florida, Tampa. I'm sure we're all dying to go on a trip somewhere interesting in the near future. So keep your eye on that as a potential conference venue. It'll be around 19 to 23 June. There is a hybrid stroke virtual backup just in case needed option for that conference. So we'd invite you to watch the website for forthcoming details. That's icrap.org, and that information will also, as always, be posted on the Engage website. Also, that's it from us. We've used our 45-minute slot. We are more than delighted to receive any online questions, most welcome from you in the WOVA application for the rest of the conference. We'll be responding to questions in there. And at any time thereafter, you're welcome to post comments and questions on the Engage website. If you look at the link on the top right, there's a contacts page, and we do respond to stuff coming in from you, the research community, on that webpage. That was it. Thank you very much indeed for your attention. That's it from Engage. Thank you very much for your attention. And thank you once again to Paula. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much, Paula. You have heard, after now 4 years, the project was launched in 2018. The knowledge transfer network Engage will come to an end. And what often happens, of course, in these moments is that projects are closed and we move on to other things and forget about what we've done in the past. And I'm certain this is not going to be the case with Engage. Engage will leave a legacy behind, and that's not only the wiki that you have seen in Paula's presentation. It is also the results of some of these very interesting Catalyst-funded research projects. It's the PhD studies that have been ongoing and that will continue and come to completion in 2022. And of course, we hope that the PhD students will remain in our industry and we will see them again. It's the summer schools, and it's also the friendships and the contacts that we've created over the duration of the Engage Knowledge Transfer Network. Now you see that Eurocontrol is 1 out of 8 consortium members, and it's been a very great pleasure to be part of the consortium and to work alongside some of the other people. Now, I think the success of Engage and the fact that it will leave a legacy behind is due and thanks to the great spirit we had in the consortium, but it's something that is very particularly thanks to the excellent work that the University of Westminster has done. And I'd like to thank Andrew Cook, who seems unexhaustible when he stands in front of you, but I know he's been working very, very hard the last 4 years, but very specifically the last month or so, almost 24 hours a day. And it has been a great, great pleasure to work with you, Andrew, on Engage. I'd also like to thank Graham Tanner, who's a little less in the spotlight sometimes perhaps, but he's been working quite as hard in the background to lubricate the Engage gearbox, if you like. Now, Graham will actually be in the spotlight tomorrow afternoon. After our technical sessions close, we have the Engage quiz, and we invite you all to attend and see Graham. And I thank again Andrew, Graham, and all the other folks in Engage. It's been a great pleasure, and I look forward to seeing the legacy survive the closure of the project. Now, we're slightly ahead of schedule, but I think if given the choice whether you would like to see my slides again or have a slightly longer break, you would probably vote in favor of the latter. So I suggest we finish here, and I will see you all back at 12:30, either in the airports and airlines technical session or in the machine learning session, Access via Hoover, and enjoy your break.
You baby, just saying I'm flexible. I do what they can to get you up. Might just fucking with my makeup on. Eat it like I need an apron on. Eat it till I need to change my tone. We can do it, take your favorite song. Take a ride into the danger zone. You know my nigga be bugging me. I just be wondering if you can fuck with me better. Itching for me like an ugly sweater. Need an image like a chucking each other. I need to